Hey there. This is the first time I've done a live stream here on YouTube, but I thought I have an episode to edit, and so I thought I'd go through the process of pretty much just editing the episode so you can kind of see how that works. I already have this recorded. This episode will come out roughly a month or so from now, so you also get kind of a peek at what's going on behind the scenes. And I'm just going to go through the process. So basically, the way that I'll edit, I'll explain it up front here, is when I've recorded each of these. So basically what I'll do is when I make a mistake, so we can see it right here, you can see there's a cut, right? So what happens is if I play this back, and it should play this, you should be able to hear this if I've configured things correctly. If not, let me know and I will try to figure that out. But if I play
Number
this,
2, Jackie Kennedy tried.
you can hear that.
Jackie Kennedy. Are you ready? Okay, here they are. JF3.
So right here,
Jackie Kennedy.
you can see I'm saying, okay, Jackie Kennedy, but I was supposed to say number 2, Jackie Kennedy, to list that. So I made a little mistake there. So
Number 2.
what I need to do essentially is to edit that out. So all I need to do, cut that here, and there we go. So this is that edit.
Way too young that year. Number 2.
Give a little
Too
more
young
space.
that year. Number 2.
And that is the basic process of editing the podcast here. So it can get kind of monotonous, but I thought if somebody wants to watch this, you're more than welcome to. So essentially, I'm just going to start from the beginning and work my way through. So this beginning part here seems like there's no
Is
edits.
based on a true story.
So I'm good. Move on. Here we go. And FYI, so I've got the stream up. You won't see this, but I've got the stream up. There should be a chat. I'm assuming with YouTube there should be a chat there. So if you notice, you're by all means feel free to ask questions, and I'll check periodically. But I do move rather quickly as far as the process is concerned, just to try to get done. So let's go.
The real person that Billy Crudup, he'd earned a name from H. White. At the time, the real person
Right there.
happened.
So cut this in.
Here actually happened. The real person
A little bit more
actually happened. The real person.
And actually, I think what I'm going to do, I'm going to apply my effects. So I've got an effects chain here that I've created, and this is a custom effects chain, essentially a bunch of different things to get that kind of a nice tone to the voice. So you can hear the difference here.
What the movie is depicting here actually
Right there, as opposed to if I turn this off.
actually happened. The real person that Billy Crudup's character is based on was a reporter named Theodore.
So you can kind of hear that difference. I'm also going to add another effects chain. There we go. So you can see the effects turned on here. Looks like the little pop-ups didn't show up in the stream to show the effects chain.
The real person.
Let me see, just so you can do that. Let me see if I can add that here. No, it doesn't seem to let me add that to the stream. Can you see that? Nope, that's not helpful at all. All right, well, I guess that's a lesson learned. So there's a little pop-up in Mixcraft here that's just showing that. But for whatever reason,
The movie was released in 19. The movie was released. A movie that's based on a true story.
So here, I'm going to cut this breath out. I don't cut every breath out because when I do that, and so I've been doing voiceover in some form or fashion
Based on a true
for
story. The movie
a decade or so, doing a bunch of different stuff, and I used to edit
based on a
radio
true story.
commercials. Before that, I mean, my background's in CG, but I've done a lot of audio edits.
That's based on a true story. The movie
And the basic process, so if you remove all of the uhs and ums and the various
that was the one.
breaths and things like that, it can
That was
get to be very robotic feeling. It doesn't sound like, a human talking as much. And so I don't remove all of the breaths, but the way I typically will do it is I'll just remove the ones at the edit points.
That was the one that covered the 1960 election.
So you can see right here.
60 election.
If you listen closely, and how much you hear that.
60 election.
It's going to determine, be based on the actual, the speakers that you have, or the headphones or speakers or whatever you're listening through. So if you're listening to this in the car, you may not be able to hear it. A lot of people listen to podcasts in the car, myself included. But I thought I'd go through that.
Back in the movie.
But in the headphones in kind of a quiet environment like I'm in right now.
Back in the movie. Back in the movie.
It's a much more, you can hear it a lot better.
1963.
So cut this out.
On November 22nd, 1963.
So there's a little cut right there.
63.
And if you do remove breaths, one of the
63.
most obvious times that it's actually being, you can tell it's being edited, is when it cuts off in the middle. So do remove breath, make sure you actually edit the entire thing. Otherwise it'll be pretty obvious.
Well, this might not seem like a big deal for many people in 19... Well, this might... Jackie light up a cigarette.
Go.
Portman's version of Jackie light up a cigarette.
Again, kind of cutting that off a little bit.
Cigarette.
So this little bit right here, you can see that waveform right there. I'm going to leave that in because that's actually the end of a T in cigarette.
A cigarette.
So you want to catch that, but not the breath right after.
Well, this might not...
And over the years, as you do more recording in various aspects, you'll get an idea of try not to breathe, you know, have as obvious breaths, but obviously everybody needs to breathe. So, so this little bit right here, this is a little flag. So while I'm recording, what I'll do is if I actually have a, if usually an edit point is I'll stop and start recording, but if for whatever reason sometimes I just need to scroll down the page in the script, or sometimes, you know, I've got 3 dogs, so sometimes the dogs are barking, sometimes, you know, there's an airplane flying over, or my neighbor decides to mow his yard. That's usually the way it works. So I'll actually just pause for a while and then start recording again. So what I'll do is I'll leave myself a little note later on in the flag saying, there's no edit here, you just need to continue on. So I can delete this, and what this means is I don't need to edit here.
The Kennedys were no different.
So there's no edit at the end here, I just need to butt these up at a natural point. So it kind of leads to another kind of point for editing here. So
the Kennedys were no different. As the conversation...
It's a little long. So you don't want it to be, this is something else I learned from editing radio commercials, you don't want something to be 100% like butted right up against each other. It can be really easy to think that you need to take this and slide it right over here, right? But that doesn't sound natural.
The Kennedys were no different. As the conversation...
See, it sounds way too quick, and when you're talking naturally in a kind of more conversive tone, it's not going to be as quick like that at the end of a sentence and beginning of another one, and so
the Kennedys were no different. As the conversation...
There we go. That's pretty good. Leave that there.
The text on screen says popping back into the movie after that's real. That's real. We hear a mention 61 imply the text on the screen says text on screen says black and white footage. The text on the screen.
That's the moment there. So select this, trim, Control T in Mixcraft. I didn't always use Mixcraft. I used to use Audition because it comes with Creative Cloud. Everybody has a subscription to Creative Cloud. Seems to
movie cuts to some black and white footage.
In any sort of creative role.
The movie cuts to some black and white footage. The text on.
So I do use Mixcraft. Oh, you know what? I forgot. I need to actually save this off. Let me save this as version 2. I usually try to keep an original like the original edit and then back, and so that way it's as close to non-destructive as you can get. I always try to do non-destructive workflows, so save that up real quick. Anyway, back to what I was talking about. Yeah, so I used to use Audition.
Going back to the movie, it's spot on. Going back to the movie role.
I used to use Audition. It's kind of what I cut my teeth on with audio editing, and I mixed back and forth. I used Ableton. I used Logic. I used Reaper for a little bit there.
No wonder she was nominated for an Oscar for her role. Going back to the movie.
And then I tried Mixcraft on the, I just saw it in an ad somewhere at some point. I was like, oh, I'll give that a try. I downloaded the trial. And man, I just love the
And that's
interface.
true.
It's just so simple.
And that's true. Well, to be honest.
So that's what I've been using for the past year and a half or so for the podcast.
Let him publish all of that. And that's true.
So really what it boils down to, most DAWs, digital audio workstations, most of them will do the same sort of thing. Think of it kind of like, it's just a tool. Like whether you use Word, whether you use some other tool to write something, Notepad, whatever, it doesn't really matter. Or pen and paper even, right? It doesn't really matter. The point is the content that you're creating.
Oh, and as a little, of her husband.
There's no right or wrong. It's really what you find helpful, and I enjoy Mixcraft.
It was the sudden death of her husband. Oh, and
I don't know if, I'm not sure, I can't really hear the audio quality from this, but I have a little webcam that's essentially what I'm using. Since this is the first time I've done this, I thought just use what I already have, right? So there's no need to buy a bunch of fancy equipment to do that. So I'm using the webcam, which I'm pretty sure that the audio stream is just pulling the audio from the actual webcam. So it's not great audio. If I continue to do this in the future, I might set up another a mic or something like that. I've got some extra mics I can do that with. But I just wanted to go through this process and learn as we go, right? I don't really do live streaming that often.
I can't even begin.
So obviously
she stood, and again,
but
I can't even.
If you have recommendations, by all means, let me know. If there's something you'd like to see, I'm more than happy to share what I can. I guess kind of on that note, I'm also assuming that it's playing, the system audio.
I can't even before.
And so you can hear everything fine. But again,
the assassination.
If you can't,
the assassination. I can't even.
Let me know. I'm not expecting really anybody to be watching this 100% live, but if you watch it back later on, by all means, let me know in the comments, and I'll try to address that later on.
And although the movie doesn't really go assassinated. Just 4 days after he was assassinated. And although the movie doesn't
little long.
Assassinated. And although the movie doesn't really.
Okay.
As for Jackie having to tell her daughter. Illinois.
Oops. Don't want to do that. Add in keyframe there. Delete this guy. Move it up. Moving it up.
Springfield, Illinois. As for Jack of Springfield, Illinois. As for
kind of leaving a little bit of space there. When you there we go.
As a little side note.
So periodically.
And sadly, John recording. As of this recording.
What I'm doing.
So Caroline is
you'll notice up here it kind of has a little asterisk. I'm coming in here and saving periodically.
As a little side note. And sadly, John only 2.
That's
as a little side note.
Here's the side note.
As a little side note, their first child. As a little side note.
That's something you need to do a lot of save often. I mean, any sort of creative work.
As a little side note, trick, just 106 days later.
I used to do a lot of fluid dynamics, which, as you can imagine, can do a lot of eat up a lot of processing power in the computer, which can also make it crash. So you learn to save a lot.
106 days later. As a little,
you don't want to spend, I mean, literally some of those frames can take 12, 14 hours for a single frame to simulate. And so you really don't want to have to lose progress
2 days after
on something like that. Save often. So I've made it a habit to hit Control S.
As I'm sure you're well aware, that's true. 2 days.
A lot. Do it a lot.
Broadway musical Camelot started. That's true. As the real Jack, the Broadway musical Camelot. Alan was a roommate of John. The Broadway music. That's true. The Broadway.
There we go. The Broadway. Talking about Camelot.
That's true.
Cut this in.
That's true. That's true. The Broadway musical.
There we go.
The Broadway music. Alan was.
Oops. Looks like forgot to delete that.
The Broadway musical. The Broadway music.
So you notice this is a kind of a unique situation. So I usually try not to do this, but sometimes obviously mess up. So obviously there are multiple takes here, and so what I did, and what I'll usually try to do, is just delete this clip because it's not needed. So I only move forward and keep recording when I'm sure that I'm good with that take, right? So a lot of times it does take multiple takes, as is the case with any recording.
That's true. The Broadway music. The playwright for.
Cut this in. Moving on, and obviously.
So covering that movie just a few weeks ago. The playwright for.
All right, so in here, I am going to take out that breath. There's a little excessive. See it there, so no big deal.
Movie just a few weeks ago. The playwright for Cam.
There we go.
Just like the movie shows, even Theodore H. White, many people. Despite this, just like the movie shows, this.
All right, and this is a cut here.
But there will never be another Camelot. Just like.
It's a little long. Let me pull this in a little bit. So we're talking 1802, 1804.
Another Camelot. Just like the movie.
That's pretty good. And a little bit tight, a little bit tighter. There we go.
And this wasn't. Speaking of which, remember, maybe, but he didn't write. And this was an exclusive interview at the request. That's all true. Well, mostly. I couldn't find anything that in the movie he's played by John. He's sort of like the Joe. Maybe, but write a now which it is true.
Whoa, wait, what?
The camera then. Despite this, the whole many people claim a lot at all. Even Theodore H. White. At the very end of the movie.
Oh, you hear my dogs in the background?
Just like the movie shows, this was something that no one really nation.
There they be. Alright, yeah, just let that means my wife's home.
And this wasn't. Speaking of which, it maybe, but the priest sort of like surely something that warranted getting printed quickly as editors at Life. Remember, there was no internet back.
Oh, okay, here we go.
And this was an exclusive interview. Surely something that warranted getting printed quickly as Jackie Kennedy. Surely something that warranted getting sent back then. And this was an exclusive internet back then. And
so I usually don't do this. This is why it's tough to find. That's why I usually don't do this, because I usually don't cut. I usually start a sentence over again. But right here is in the middle of a sentence.
Back then, and this was an
see, so it's
exclusive interview at the request of Jackie Kennedy. So Jackie Kennedy, surely something.
So
surely something.
What I'm going to do is I'm actually going to cut it here. Oops. Looks like I jumped too far. Here we go.
Jackie told Theodore in the interview, just like the movie showed, there'll be great presidents again.
Oh, I undid too many times.
Just like,
there you go.
Never be another Camelot.
Oops, I undid too many times. All right, well, that happens. What happened was I jumped to the end by accident.
And this was an exclusive interview back then, and this was an
so here we are.
Kennedy, surely something that will be, surely something.
I'm going to do this part right here, surely, instead of and, a little bit more of a normal break.
Exclusive interview at the request of Jackie Kennedy, surely something that.
All right, so I have some breaths there, that's fine.
Kennedy, surely something that.
It's not fine for the final recording, but I can easily cut those out. It's no big deal. There we go. So usually I'll try to give a little bit more space, but since this is mid-sentence, I'm going to cut it together a little bit closer.
Request of Jackie Kennedy, surely something.
Not that close.
Request of Jackie Kennedy, surely something that. Request of Jackie Kennedy, surely something that warrants.
There you go, mid-sentence. And the idea is, hopefully you will never know.
Hated the interview to his editors at Life. Remember, there was no internet back then, and this was an exclusive interview at the request of Jackie Kennedy, surely something that warranted getting sent back.
Even a little bit more, I'd be okay with.
There was no internet back then, and this was an exclusive interview at the request of Jackie Kennedy, surely something that warranted.
There we go.
That brings us, that's true, but that brings us back.
So right here, got this. Here.
Or to get on a plane and fly back.
And cut out this extra little breath here.
Fly back. Fly back. That brings us to the.
So you can tell the difference there between cutting in the middle and then you can even see it in the break a little bit. I could pull this over and have it be even more visible. But so you can see I've got what 1953, 1954, not even a full second right there. And then over here, I've got 03 to 04, so almost a full second right there, break between those. So you can see kind of the difference between cutting mid-sentence and not, and then even beforehand, it was a little tough to see. So again, that's not usually something I try to do, but that's how it goes.
This episode of
Oh, is that the end?
But that doesn't change link.
All right, so that's the end of that. So
linked to Kennedy's presidency. This episode of Based on a True Story.
All right, so that's the end there. And so what I'm going to do is, this is the outro. So I'm going to leave myself a little gap there, so I know that's the outro for the second part of editing.
Really, that book is that's really just. I'd recommend starting with reading. That's really just a bunch of. Really, that book is. That's really just.
Book. Pull this in here.
Well, Jacqueline Kennedy. Really, that book is a collection of interviews.
Here.
Before we get to the answer for the record. Before we get to the.
Here. That's where that cut was. Whoops. There we go. Pull that over a little bit. Didn't want to be too far though.
TrueStoryPodcast.com. Before we get to.
All right. So this is the review. this review answer is a little bit longer because it's one I was rather confused about. It makes sense.
Zen Pirate QQ, Zen Pirate
QQ. There's 5 keys. It's really confusing. They mentioned some words that
says
I never said.
here in a second. Zen Pirate.
It was a fairly negative review, but oh well.
Ouch. Ouch.
Yeah, it was a tough review. That was stung a little bit, but you know, hey, not for everybody. I understand. That's fine.
Prediction and word choice, man. Ouch.
Give myself some break. And just trying to kind of explain. Usually I don't leave a really long reply, but that one was really confusing.
As for the way
like you mentioned, you know, using some terms, some words that fortunately, as you could tell from
right,
this, well, with this here, it's fairly prevalent. I would assume that everything in the show is scripted. You know, everything's scripted. Even the review there was scripted. I wrote it out the way I wanted to write it out, and so on. And so the benefit to that is I can go back and search. So I searched for the words, and the words I've never used those words that he mentioned using the review. I've never used those words ever on the podcast, so I was kind of confused.
As for the way surely they happen when leaving a review too, right?
So I'm all for
review too, right?
Constructive.
As for the way
I'm all for constructive criticism, as long as it's constructive, right? And there's always a way to improve. And there's always a way to do that. I'm happy to improve. I'm always willing to improve. But when it's something that I can't really do anything about, because if I can't find the words, I have no idea what he's talking about. So it's not really helpful.
But I do have, and since you've moved on, that's if you're even, hopefully, since so shall I. But I do have some good news for.
Good news.
The good news is. I do have some, but
yeah. YouTube's telling me that there might be some buffering. Apologize for that. Not sure why that is.
Much difference anytime soon. Soon.
But no worries.
You'll hear much difference anytime soon. You'll hear much difference anytime soon. But I do have.
There you go. That's the good news start. Good news for this particular user is podcasts are free. So don't like it, don't listen to it. That's kind of the way I look at it. I mean, that's fine. My show's not for everybody. There's a lot of podcasts out there, and everybody doesn't have to listen to every podcast. That's perfectly fine.
Of course. That's if you're. I'm just. Whew, by the. Of course.
There's a lot of.
Intended to free us from that. Of course.
Break here.
Intended to free us from that stress for a few moments. Of course. For a few moments. Of course.
Looks. YouTube says everything should be good for streaming, so I don't know what that was. A little bit of a buffering, I guess.
By the way, if you're not, no, so shall I. So shall I. By the way, no, but let's get back to our episode. When Jack, number one. Here are the 2 truths and 1 lie. Number 1, when JF. Don't forget you can find link, and that brings us to don't forget.
There, and this should be
the end of your learning about the true story of Jackie Kennedy. Don't forget you can, and I'll chat with you again really soon.
All right, so that's step one. So step one is getting everything edited together, make sure that everything is good to go. And now I'm going to save this off as version 3 because oops, I did not hit save, I hit cancel instead. So version step 3. So essentially version 3 here, and it looks like you're not able to see the save box. That's fine. You'll see the version 2 switch to version 3 up here at the top. So essentially what I'm doing now is I save that off as an instance, and now I need to come in and add music to it. So process of adding music, start in the intro, I'm gonna add a new track, my music track, and I have a ton of stock audio that I've paid for, and essentially that's what I use. So royalty-free stock audio. I use audioblocks.com because it's a subscription service that I can keep adding stuff if I need it. But they have a really great backlog of stuff. So let me see, what would be a good... Maybe this one, National Anthem? Because she's the First Lady, maybe? Oh, how about this? How about America the Beautiful? Yeah, no, I like that. Go very patriotic for First Lady, Jackie Kennedy. All right, so the way this is going to work, set that there, and then probably right around here. So it kicks in really high here. What I'm going to do is cut it in here. So, edit this in, slide this here, another edit point here, and we're going to set this to -25, so it's going to slide down.
Natalie Portman has been nominated for.
There we go. So it starts. So it's nice and kind of loud up, normal level.
Natalie Portman has been.
And then it just slides into the background. And then this can go to negative.
Natalie Portman has been nominated for an Oscar 3 times. The first was a nomination in the category of...
Alright, so we have that in the intro. Now what we need to do, I'm going to pull this in again, and I like to use the same song, that way it's the same at the end. So, here.
This is based on a true story.
Ending here. Again, -25, and then down to nothing. So kind of fade in here. Go here, and let's try this.
For countless people around the world, Jacqueline Kennedy. I'm Dan Lefebvre, and this is based on a true story.
Move it a little bit.
The world, Jacqueline Kennedy. I'm Dan Lefebvre, and this is based on a true story.
That's good. So it ends right there, and then this comes in before. So no dead air time, but
is based on a
obvious segment changes.
On a true story. It's time for two truths and a lie.
And that ends up with a change of 3 seconds. That's not really that much. I try to keep usually around 5 to 6 seconds there because it's let your brain kind of change. That's what this is something I learned from video editing. I've done a lot of things in my career, but so from video editing, usually 4 to 6 seconds is going to be about the amount of time that it will take for somebody to be able to read something on the screen. And so I kind of take that same philosophy for audio, where I give about 4 to 6 seconds for somebody to be able to kind of digest a switch between things. So in order to get that 4 to 6 seconds, I'm going to have to push this up a little bit, which means this here. Pull this over.
And this is based on a true story.
And then this will have to shift over a little bit. That's fine. That'll give me my 6 seconds or so. 7 to 11. That's pretty close. Almost to 12.
True story. It's time for two truths.
There we go. And then from this segment to the actual show, the actual meat of the show, I need something else that's kind of what does this sound like? Okay, I like that. But I like that primarily because it's got the trumpets in it, similar to what we had before. Let's try this, see what this sounds like. No. Dramatic movie opening. Nope. When in doubt, fall back to the classics, right? Little classic. It's a little quiet. I do like I like classical music. It's great. It always has a nice regal feel to it. I like that. I think I'm going to use this. All right, so what I need to do, let me delete this guy here. I don't want that anymore. Get some nice Chopin. Has nothing to do with Jackie in particular, but it's a nice classical tune, and I kind of like that, the way that starts. So,
movie simply titled Jackie. The movie opens with a close-up shot of Natalie Portman.
So I'm going to start right here with this kind of kind of main part. So this is kind of an intro, and then this is kind of main part. It's 15 seconds, but that's okay. It's kind of long.
The movie opens with a close-up shot of Natalie.
But I like the way it kind of starts, you know, kind of the main tune there, so I'm okay with that. It's kind of a long thing. This is a shorter episode, so it's all right. I do keep that into account when some episodes are longer than others, and a lot of that is based on, well, quite honestly, just, you know, the amount of research that goes into it. There's a ton of stuff we could cover in here, and so that often lends it to simplifying even more, which then will lead to a shorter episode. And sometimes there's just not much stuff to cover, so it kind of varies. But when it's shorter, I'm okay with a little bit longer breaks there.
The movie opens.
Since the overall show, I try not to keep the overall show too long. So now that we have that, I'm going to pull this in at the end here, and this is going to be the ending of this here. Set that there. Set this to -25. -25 is kind of the magic sweet spot that I use as kind of a very slow fade in.
End quote. It seemed the
Listen farther so you can start to hear a little bit more.
Magic Camelot. It seemed the
You can kind of hear in the background if you listen close.
primary reason he wrote that for the Life article was as a favor to a grieving widow's presidency. Linked to Kennedy's presidency.
I mean, realistically, it would probably be great if I could use the Camelot musical for this kind of stuff, but it's copyrighted, so nope. Go with some classics. And then pull this in, and then again, no dead air time. So just as that fades off.
This episode of Based on a...
And then the final thing, this enigmatic piano cue is kind of the one that I use for everything. So, or for the ending all the time. It's kind of, I don't have a theme song for the podcast. There was a conscious decision not to have one. But I do want that sense of consistency. So at the end, that's where this comes in.
And produced by me, Dan Lefebvre. The topic of JFK.
So always, the ending of the show, it always has this song kind of ends, and then this little intro.
This episode of Based on a True Story was written and produced by me, Dan Lefebvre.
And then always kicks in that same tune, and then to the ending. So, but one variable here is the ending is always a different amount of time. So let me pull this over here.
Really soon.
And that means this here, again, -25. And this guy here, the -25. You'll see why in a second.
And really soon.
I don't want it to be that abrupt.
Again, really soon. And I'll chat with you again really soon. And I'll chat with you again really soon.
And the ending there. All right, so what this is here is I need to merge these two. Where I merge them, it varies every time. The key is to really not make it as visible with where that merging happens. So I can see here, usually I try to find a spot where I'm talking. Let's see how that sounds. A little bit of overlap, that's fine.
Exactly that, a form of entertainment. And life is...
So if you listen to with the vocal track, this is what it sounds like.
On to find countless others that are more up your alley. Podcasts are exactly that, a form of entertainment. And life is stressful enough. There's no need to bring that...
So if you listen closely, you can hear it, but if I solo this, you'll really hear it more. So what I might actually do is adjust that. That's a little too much. So let's try this. Pull this over. Let's try this over here. See if this sounds better. That's not as bad. It's a little bit. I mean, there's still a cut there. Obviously, there's always going to be a cut there. But you can see it kind of goes. It starts high and then kind of goes low as it's a little more natural. So if I blend this together with the vocal track,
that's one of the great things about free entertainment like podcasts.
You can't even tell. That's exactly what I'm going for. All right, so that is the end. That is this is edited. So the last step is export this. And you're probably not going to be able to see this on the stream because for whatever reason it doesn't like to show the actual pop-up windows, but hitting this is episode 102. So basically what I'm doing, I'm exporting that, so you'll see this down here in the corner. It's creating the actual WAV file. And then the next step is I need to bring that into Audition, where I'm going to normalize it to bring the levels kind of to a normal point, and then export that for QA. Now, I do have a little bit of normalizing in this master effect here, this master effect chain, which you aren't going to be able to see even if I click on that. But over here at the bottom, you probably can't see that here. It looks like it's getting cut off. There's the ability to have effects. One thing I like about Mixcraft, that you can have effects on individual channels here, but I actually can have effects on the entire thing overall. So I can do that. I add a little bit of effects to compress it and help with the normalization to level things out. I'm not a big fan of the way that Mixcraft handles the normalization on the tracks themselves, because it tends to be just for that individual edit or individual point, and because I have a lot of edit points in here, as I always do on every single track, then it tends to be rather monotonous and not very helpful to normalize everything. So I'll do that across the entire thing, then I'll export it and bring it into Audition to do a simple normalization across that entire file, since that is essentially flattening it down to a single file, and it's not a bunch of individual ones to normalize. So that's essentially the process that I use for that. And I guess in theory I could normalize it in Mixcraft, but I kind of like the normalization in Audition a little bit better. Since I have both, might as well use them. iZotope actually has a really great normalizer as well, and I've used that in the past. Unfortunately, though, it doesn't let you export to MP3 unless you have a version that costs like $600 or $700 more than I'm willing to pay. The version I bought is only like $100 or something like that. So it's crazy expensive for the ability to export to MP3, which it is what it is. It's their software, that's fine. But that's more than I'm willing to pay, so I don't use that for normalization. I use that for more advanced edits if there's something that's really required to remove hiss or bumping or whatever. There's some magic that's worth there. I originally bought it not for the podcast actually, but for some video production work I was doing. Audio for video. Alright, so now that I have that, I'm going to hop over to Audition. So let me change this stream here to show Audition. Alright, so here in Audition, let's pull this file over. And I've got the file here, so let me just drag this in. Open this up, and you can see that there it's -3, -6. When I was working in radio, while working on radio ads, I didn't work in radio. Worked for a production company that did some radio ads. But we would typically try to be anywhere from -3 to -6 was our -6 was kind of our target. So that's a little hot. So I'm going to bring that down. You can see -3. It kind of bounces it down a little bit, and kind of the average is there. Up a little bit, down a little bit. That's fine. But normalized to -3 is what I use there. And save this out. Let that save. And that's it. That's the end. The next step here, which I won't bore you with, is essentially taking that MP3 file. I will throw that on my phone and QA it. Essentially, it's just listening through the entire thing, make sure it's all good. I have some friends and family that help me with that, and so I share it with them, and they let me know if there's any mistakes or anything like that, and then I come back and edit it if there are. If there aren't, it's all good to go, and I'm ready to publish. The actual audio file I'm ready to publish. The next step before it's actually 100% ready to go would be to create the graphics for it, to create the blog post for it, schedule everything out, and make sure that is all ready to go. So maybe I'll do that in a future video. If you want to see that, by all means let me know, and I can go through that process as well. But for now, that's where we're going to end this stream now. I hope you enjoyed, and chat with you again later.